Hey, my name is Augustine Colebrook. I'm the principal at Midwifery Wisdom Collective. My focus is on big picture political movements that are happening within the profession, some of the controversial questions, and centering voices that are not being regularly heard.
I'm Leila Wyatt. I am a traveling student midwife, learning midwifery from cultures and a lineage of midwifery throughout the United States. I'm here to center the voices of students to hear their calling, their pathway, why they chose midwifery, and even share a bunch of birth stories along the way.
Greetings, I'm Jamara Amani. I am a midwife, a mom, and a social justice activist. I am here to challenge white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, and anything that keeps people from being their best and living their best selves, as we have the human right to do. And I am looking forward to sharing stories of birth justice on this podcast.
Hi there, I'm Delmar Bowden. I am non-binary, queer, transgender, Latinx, midwife, and full-spectrum doula. My focus is on increasing access and equity in midwifery care and midwifery education.
Hello, my name is Angie Love. I am a community nurse midwife in Vero Beach, Florida, at the practice of Midwife Love. I also do telehealth midwifery through Midwife RX. I'm a mama, and I am committed to maintaining birth choices for all people and educating a future generation of midwives, because we will not die out.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about you? Your name, where you're from, your pronouns, what you're all about.
Okay. Well, hi, I'm Lora. Lora Fiala, my last name out there, I guess. And I'm in the Phoenix metro area in Arizona. So specifically, I live in Mesa, and I try to stay on the east side of Phoenix because it can take an hour and a half plus to drive from one side of Phoenix to the other.
Oh, really?
So we have a fantastic birth community here, and I'm not needed on like that side. My dog is trying to be a part of this. She's very supportive.
Hi.
And so I have been in birth work for about 6 years. And I started after the birth of my first son. When I was pregnant with my husband and I took a Bradley method class. We were doing some, we'll step back a little farther. We were doing some group prenatal visits with the midwifery group I was with. We were with a hospital group, and one of the midwives was like, oh yeah, just come do this group and that'll be enough education for you. It's like your education and your prenatals all in one. And I was like, fantastic. And then about, I don't know, maybe a third of the way through class, they rotated midwives. So different midwives would come in, and we had one midwife come in, and she's like very blunt. And she's like, if you want an unmedicated birth, you need to take a class outside of this. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm signing up for a class, because that was my goal. My mom had some not great birth stories with my sister and I. And so it was like, I just wanted something different. And so I went and signed up for a Bradley class, because it was, touted as for natural childbirth. And so that's what we did. And there were some weeks that we went to class basically twice, because we would go to our group prenatal, and then we would go to Bradley class at the end of the week, kind of thing. And so, and after I ended up having a really great birth in the hospital and had to use some tools. I used a lot of tools that we learned in Bradley, but I talked, it's like we had a nurse that was not super supportive. And so had used some stuff that it was like, okay, you have to stop. Like, we're okay. Like, learning how to stand up for myself. And my husband was super helpful and really on board. I had a really great birth. And afterwards I was like, oh my God, I have to tell all the people about this. And I had gone to school to be a teacher before I had my kids, and realized that elementary education was where I thought I wanted to be, was not where I wanted to be. Parents and school districts and principals and whatnot are too much for me. Don't get paid enough to run in that circle. So God bless the teachers. but I was like, this is something I can do. I still wanted to teach. And so when my youngest, or my only at that time, he was 9 months old, and they had a workshop that they were hosting in the Phoenix area, and I went, and he came with me for the majority of the time. My husband came in the evenings and would take him for the evening portions, but I had a pack and play in class with me. Like, we did it. We got through it, and I started teaching. And as much as I loved my class, after getting into it, I realized that the instructor that I had put in a ton of time on her own to make the class what it was. And I was like, you did not give me, I was not prepared to teach, like, going into it.
Right.
And I came into it in this, like, I don't know, like, idealistic world of like, you take this class and you can go into the hospital and have this beautiful birth. And I kept having people coming back and being like, we had this happen or that happened. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And so the more that I'm like, okay, well, I'll just make the class better. Like, I'll add stuff, even though we're not supposed to add things. We weren't supposed, like, I'm going to add things. I'm going to make it better. I'm going to like, I'm going to step up the game. And so I found evidence-based birth. And so I adored everything that Rebecca Decker was doing. She's still one of my favorite people in the birth world. Mm-hmm. And they had a seminar one night on how to become an instructor. And I listened, I asked a ton of questions, and I walked out. It was like a Zoom call. And I walked out and I told my husband, I want to spend a bunch of money. Are you okay with that? And because their training their structures changed, and so at that time the training wasn't cheap. And so I was like, but it was something that I was like, I got off that call, and it was like every bone in my body was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is where, like, this is what I want to teach. I want the evidence to give to my families and let them make the choice, but like, they need to have this knowledge and this foundation to back it up on it. And so at the time, they didn't have their full length class. They just had, like, you could take this much of it and imprint it or like incorporate it in whatever you were teaching. And so that's what I did. I like rearranged the schedule of what I was teaching. And I was like, okay, pause. This is not Bradley anymore. This is EVB. And then I would teach. And I was just like, but it was really hard because I technically was not supposed to do this. Mm-hmm. So I'm not with Bradley. I'm not a Bradley instructor anymore. And so I'm like, I don't know what they're going to do to me, but so be it. If that helps anybody else out there, it's not a company I would invest my money in. But their logic is good, but it's just their follow through is the back end is not there. And so, and they've had instructors trying to help them. And it was just something I was like, I don't have the fight for this. I want something that's great. But I had another instructor in my community that was very tight with the people that were there. And so it was really hard for me to be in two camps because I couldn't speak it out that was part of two. So when the time came that Rebecca released a full-length childbirth class, I was like, bye, Bradley, this is what I'm doing, because the class is fantastic. I teach it 6 weeks. I'm still teaching. I've been teaching that class for the last 3 years. And I have almost every parent that comes through, I would say, is more well-versed at the end of 6 weeks than they were at the end of 12 weeks of Bradley.
Bradley, I feel like, is just absolutely incredible that parents sign up to go once a week for 12 weeks. Like,
yeah, it's a commitment.
I don't know how people, let's be honest, it's privilege.
Yeah, it is. It totally is.
Right? Like, you're obviously designing this class for a very specific type of family that has access to figure out work, childcare, cost, time of life for 12 straight weeks together to come to this childbirth class. So it's not really very accessible.
No, it's not. And so EVB is a flipped model classroom. So
yeah, I love it.
Yeah, they do like an hour or so a week at home on their own. And then we meet for 2 hours the first and last week and an hour in between. And I'm like, my Zoom calls, I'm like, if you can't make it, I'll record it for you. And I'm like, I tell them, I'm like, I'm only sharing it with the people in this class. It won't go anywhere else. Please ask your questions. Everyone feels comfortable. And it's a great setup. It's a great community. And I've put it out there that I'm like, if you need help with costs, please let me know. But
what's really interesting about that too, is that it's what families put into it is what they're going to get out of it as well. I mean, we know that the evidence-based birth curriculum is great, but like you said, like it's work that you do on your own and then you come together to discuss it versus another class where you sit in front of them and just regurgitate information at their faces every week. And so if someone's really in it, they're in it. If they're not, they're not.
And on, at 8 o'clock at night after you've been talked to for 45 minutes, it's like the whole last half of class is totally like,
nope,
maybe I caught a little bit. And so it's just, they just don't retain it at all.
Yeah.
And so it's just weird. Anyways. So was teaching for quite a while, and I was taking trainings. I'd show up to trainings and I'd be like the only childbirth educator there. And everyone else, it's all doulas. And I'm like, I want to incorporate stuff into my class. And Gina Kirby's workshop was the one that finally pushed it over the edge. And the way she teaches and talks about birth, I came home and I was like, so I want to do a thing. So my husband was like, okay. And at that point, my kids were both a little bit older. And I think my youngest was 2 at the time. So in the process, I've had another child. So I have 2 boys. There's now are 6 and 4. And so I was like, I want to follow my students into birth. And that's really what the drive was. It wasn't like to take on this whole giant slew of doula clients that I'm only seeing once before birth. Like I wanted to get to know them. I wanted them to be a part of my class and then to be able to follow them through. And the majority of the doula clients that I've taken on, that's the case. Like they take my class, then I follow them through. Cause that's what it was like. People were coming back and I'm like, they just needed someone that was there to like help give them that little
remind
extra push,
them of that thing. Yeah. Exactly. I feel like I had a client the other day as a doula who, well, I guess it wasn't the other day, but we met, and at our first prenatal visit, we were just kind of covering a few things. And I was like, so which childbirth class did you guys do the first time around, after they told me about their traumatic hospital birth? And they were like, oh, hypnobirthing. And I'm like, well, what happened? Well, I mean, I like the hypnobirthing course, and you're telling me that you were like screaming in the bathtub, and I'm like, what happened? And they were like, we just totally forgot.
Yeah.
Like everything that was taught to us was just gone. And they're kind of like, I feel like if I had a doula to just go, let's remember those breathing. Hey, you're okay. Let's come back to that.
Yeah.
That we would have been great. Right. And it is sometimes that, I mean, not only partners can't always be responsible for that. They deserve their own experience in birth too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, and that was it. That was the stories that were coming back. And I feel very privileged that I got the birth that I had with my first, because that doesn't happen in the hospital. I mean, I walked in at 6 as a first-time mom, pushed the baby out, and 3 hours later, like I labored at home for a long time before it was just like all this, it was just this textbook birth that I feel really grateful for, but it didn't prepare me for like what most first-time moms go through, or a lot of first-time moms anyway. So, so at some point, I was asked to, had a birth center that I was working with, as a doula, and I knew their home birth midwives and whatnot. They were looking for assistants. And so to assist the home birth midwives. And I was like, ooh, that sounds good. I'm just like this knowledge junkie. I'm like, you give me a course, you give me something, and I just want to take them all. And so I went and I was like, I want to do this assistant thing. I wanted to be more in home birth, and in the doula world here, that is one thing that I feel like it's a little hard to break into home birth. COVID's actually helped a little bit, because
for doulas to support home birth, or to break into being the birth assistant?
To break in as a doula into home birth here. It's like the home birth midwives, I love the vast majority of them, but they have their short list of doulas that they've worked with.
Oh, right.
So it's like, unless you find a mom somehow, like outside of that, if they're looking for a doula, then usually they take the recommendations of their midwives. Which then also creates this great bubble when you have this birth, because it's like the doulas have worked with the midwives, and it's like they have this, like, they know how each other works and whatnot.
Or the midwives have been screwed over by a doula once or twice.
That too, yes.
And they're like, never again. Like, never again will I trust this. You know, I was at a birth one time where legit the doula was like giving the birthing person homeopathics behind the midwife's back.
Yeah.
And okay, homeopathics, like, they're going to really make that big of a deal, but like, just tell the midwife, just say, hey, by the way, I already have been giving her arnica for the past 6 hours. Like, just say it. You like, let's be a team. Because when you don't, the midwife is like, never again.
Totally.
Never again.
Yeah. And so like, it's hard to break into the birth world, into the home birth world as a doula is what I was finding. And so the home birth, the assist side, which I think is not easy to break into. Like, I knew somebody that knew somebody, and I like kind of like knew, like, I was in the world. So if I can give any advice to people, like off the bat, as a doula, as a childbirth educator, as a student, is to learn your community, to like go to events, to mingle, to socialize, to like get your face known. And that I have been told that a lot of times. They're like, how do you show up to everything? And I'm like, I have to, like, but it helped me, because it's like the midwives that were offering this training, they're like, oh yeah, I know Lora. Like, and so I was able to be a part of this home birth team, and they were just looking for assistance. This practice mainly does assist, and they do a pretty high volume. And so once I finally got into it, I was like, oh my God, this is where I need to be. Like, it was just this switch that flipped, and I was like, this is it. I want to do what she's doing. And I didn't get that in the hospital, because hospital providers are different, and OBs are not midwives. And and so like really being in a home birth setting, where I was helping, I'm like, I'm the second, so I like have to know what's going on, because it's not safe for this mom if I don't know what's going on or how to help the midwife. I don't need to know the things, but I have to understand what she's asking for. And so I was like, I want to do this. And it all kind of coincided with the doula training I had taken was through the Matrona. And this is this wonderful older midwife named Wapio, teaches courses. She was a midwife for like 30 years, was unlicensed. It's just fantastic and amazing. And she was offering this birth keepers cohort, and it's a year-long program. And it was like an accelerated version of her midwifery curriculum. And so I had signed up for that shortly after starting to assist. And it was the kind of the collision of the two where I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is where I need to be. And I need to be a midwife. And so I knew I wanted to be in birth work, and I hope to be here for quite a while. But and so I started looking into resources and options, and I felt really called to stay with the program that I was with, which the Matrona is not an accredited program. And so I was gonna go. The PEP process was my choice. And so that's the journey that I'm on right now. And so I've had so I started with, I had reached out to a few midwives that I was like, are you looking for students? Trying to find a preceptor. It's basically like, you get in it and are in births. And, the didactics is for you to figure out, and PEP is the way I've taken it. And I was like, that's fine. I'm doing the didactic work. And so I started reaching out to some midwives, and I reached out to a few, and it was like, they're like, it's just not the right time for us, or we already have students, or I had 2 incidences where they're like, we just brought on a new student. And I was like, if I'd asked you a week ago, and it's like, so I was like, okay, is this really where I should be? And so I reached out to a midwife that I was like, I'm fairly positive she doesn't have students. I don't know the last time she actually had a student. And we had known each other from different circles from being in the birth world. And so she was like, yeah, we went for smoothies. And so she said, let's chat and see if this will work. And so we chatted, and she is such a doll, and but she's never had a student before. And so it's been an interesting learning experience. And she forewarned me upfront. She's like, my practice is super slow right now. Like she had taken some time off because COVID was crazy here, and as it is everywhere. But our home birth midwives just got slammed. And so she had some difficult things come up in her practice. And so she had taken some time off. So she's like, I'm kind of rebuilding, but she's been a midwife for 10 years. And so I was like, okay, well, I start slow somewhere. And so I started working with her. I started going to prenatals. We started doing, and birth after birth after birth transferred. And so we have had so many transfers. It has been crazy.
So let's back up just a teeny bit, because I want to hear, so you're with PEP. You did PEP because you loved your matrona doula training, but you knew that the matrona's midwifery training wasn't accredited in Arizona.
Totally, yeah.
Right.
It's not accredited, like with whatever it's not MEAC accredited. So it's not just Arizona. It's like, MEAC.
It's like, if it's not MEAC, then why do a training like that? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but I was already in love with it. So
yeah. How are you with PEP? So for anyone who's listening and doesn't know, can you give a description about what the performance evaluation process is?
Yeah. So you have to put together a portfolio basically of births. So there's 4 phases. The first phase is 10 births, and it's like you can be there in any capacity. So I was done with phase 1 before I started, because there doesn't have to be like a certified preceptor or anything there. It's just anybody, if the janitor was changing the trash can in the corner of the room when she was birthing, he could sign off, that kind of, it doesn't matter. So for the most part, it was parents that signed off for me, or for some of the training births that I was doing when I was training to become a birth assist, or the births that I ended up using. But there are student midwives. There's one that I'm working with right now. I have worked with, I guess, that has been no births and is coming in, and that's like her first experience. And so she's just observing. So it's an observe phase. Phase 2 is assisting, is what they call it. And that's where I'm at. I'm getting towards the end of phase 2. And you have to do 20 births. And so don't quote me on all this, but it's 20 births, 20 prenatals, 20 newborn exams, and like 10 postpartum visits or something like that, which everything outside of the birth, I'm already like far exceeded.
Right.
Because I guess births and newborns exams, because they kind of go hand in hand there. But and to do those, you have to be with a certified preceptor. So the preceptor has to be certified with NARM, which is the organization that runs the PEP process. And they do the MEAC accreditation too. It's just a different pathway to go through them. Phase 3 is you are the primary, and so you have, I believe it's 20 or 25 births, and you have like 75 prenatals, and it's like all the numbers are more, and you have to be in a leadership role in anything that you're doing. So you're the one catching baby, and your preceptor is like behind you, like making sure it's still her license or their license that you're practicing under, but you're the one that's taking a primary role. And then phase 4 is 5 births. So you can submit to take the NARM, which is the giant test at the end, after you complete phase 3. And then phase 4 is 5 additional births in a primary capacity. So
why did you choose PEP over MEAC? Because we've got, Midwives College of Utah, National Midwifery Institute, National College of Midwifery at the time, Birthwise, so what was your reasoning?
So a big part of it was cost. I didn't have a desire to put a ton of money into a MEEC accredited program when I was already taking what I still feel like the Matrona is a really solid program.
Sure.
The midwifery part of it is a 2-year journey. You have to show that you're completing births. They run off of, I have a slew of midwifery textbooks sitting over here, Varney, Fry, lots of anatomy stuff. And so it didn't feel to me like I wanted to put all of the extra money into MEEC when I didn't feel like I was going to get more out of it than I was already getting from somewhere else. And for us in the state where I'm at, MEEC's not required. Like you're required to sit for NARM. So to get licensed in Arizona, you have to sit for NARM and pass that test, but you don't have to have a MEEC accredited school education. Which they're talking about potentially changing, but our midwifery laws here are kind of whack and really outdated.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. I want to hear all about this Arizona transfer Pitocin BS that I'm hearing about.
It's ridiculous. I'm sure maybe Augustine's filled you in a little bit because she had lots of things to say at the conference I took with her this summer. She was like,
I interviewed a lot of people, right? Yeah. And I interviewed for Augustine, and I was actually like one of the people that like told her that, and she's like, "What? I need to talk to these Arizona people," But so, if they did introduce something regarding MEEC, they would probably have a bridge for the PEP people anyways.
That's the hope, is that there's some kind of bridge, because that's what they've done in the past. The state, if you look at our state history, LMs were able to keep their licensure even when they moved to have to have a CPM. So the vast majority of our home birth midwives are CPMs, but we do still have some LMs out there that are just, they're licensed midwives. They took the state test, but never got certified with NARM. You can't do that now. So I couldn't walk in and just be like, I just want to take your state test and be a midwife. But they've have grandmothered people into the program, to the process. So that's the hope. But my education goals have shifted. And so, so after working through some of this stuff, and going through the PEP process, and partly taking Augustine's class and talking with, we have a handful of CNMs that do home birth here. My goal actually at this point is to become a CNM. And so,
so you're going to finish PEP?
I'm going to finish PEP. And the reason, sorry.
No, I'm just laughing at you. I'm just like, I hear
it's a little wild and it's a little crazy, but I have, my education background didn't lead to a lot of science classes. Right. My required science class when I was astronomy in college. And so I had a lot of science classes to take in order to get into the nursing program.
Why are you wanting to shift from becoming a CPM, a certified professional midwife, which can go through PEP or MEEC in order to pass the NARM and then license, to a certified nurse midwife? Like what was that shift in you to, I mean, I know you mentioned it was at Augustine's conference a little bit, but what was the biggest reason?
So part of it is that I'm actually working. So back to my working with my first preceptor, she's had a light client load, has been kind of building stuff up. Was reached out to by another midwife that I had actually asked to work with before my finding this preceptor. And she said she had just brought on a student.
Yeah.
And she reached out and was like, so I'm looking for a student and I only have, I have a pretty light client load and I'm going to be done taking births in November. Well, it was supposed to be December anyways. So it was like going to be done by the end of the year. So the end of this year, she was going to be done taking births. And she's actually on the route to become a CNM. And so talking with her about nursing school and the scope of a CNM here in Arizona is so much broader than a scope of a CPM. The other aspect is with a CNM, I can teach after the fact. And I know there are ways to teach with a CPM, and I know there are some wonderful, I mean, Augustine is a prime example of being able to teach with a CPM, but teaching is still something that I have a great passion for. I mean, I've always wanted to be a teacher. I just didn't know it was going to be adult education when I, was 18 and trying to make life decisions. And so the thought of helping change what CNMs look like in the future to make it a more holistic practice is now something that's really desirable to me and something that I want to do. I know there's going to be CPMs out there for lots of time, and I know there's going to be teachers for them, but I feel like the CNMs are getting so medicalized that I want to be somebody that's like, hi, look, you don't have to yank placentas out and give Pitocin to everybody. Like, which is not all of our CNMs here, but we do have a good handful of CNMs that I'm like, why aren't you an OB? Or like, that's all that you've seen is OB. You've worked with OBs your whole life. And so to have that opportunity to be like, hey, I'm a CNM that does out-of-hospital births, or I'm a CNM that does in-hospital births, and you can have this look. I don't know where it's going to lead, but a lot of that in me is like, it feels like the right path to move on to, which is also another reason that I'm like, I don't know, I've waffled with Meek.
Right.
But I'm like, it's a lot of money for not a whole lot more outcome, but a CNM it's a lot of money, but there's a good salary differential there. And I mean, even looking at our CPMs versus our CNM out of hospital rates, like our CNMs are getting paid what the CPM should be getting paid.
Right.
But because that's making a livable wage, but they're able to do it and demand that price, and people don't bat an eye at it. They're also able to collect insurance or have better ability to collect insurance. Not all of them do, but because their CNMs are recognized. I also really hope to be able to make some change and have some way that we can bring that CM certification to the West Coast, or to have some other avenue, because there should be a way to get into midwifery that does not drive through nursing. And I firmly believe that. But we don't.
That's my concern for you listening to your story, right? Like that is like where, and of course, for those of you who are listening, most of you, if you're a student midwife today, or you're considering becoming a student midwife today, have gone through this battle between, do I go the PEP route, the MEEK route, or the CNM route? Like that's the question. That's like the big question. And some of you listening may have already like done all three, right? Like you started in PEP, and then you went to MEEK, and then you went drop from one MEEK to another MEEK, and then you went to CNM instead, or you started at CNM, and then you realized in your clinicals in the hospital that you were like, there's no way I could unbrainwash myself from this experience. I need to get out now. And that's my concern and my question for like how and again, I don't know some of your philosophy and things like that, but there is a big, wide understanding within the holistic birth communities that, and you've been a doula in the hospital, that, it's not always the CNM that's sitting at the edge of the bed that wants to yank that placenta out.
Yeah.
The institution of the hospital's policies will fire you if you don't. Right. And so like, how do you feel that's going to affect your journey?
I still feel like at some point I will be an out-of-hospital midwife. Like, I don't foresee me joining a giant hospital practice and spending all my hours, in an L&D room. I don't know how it's going to affect my journey. I don't. And I'm not trying. And that's part of why I wanted to finish the PEP process in case I get a semester in nursing school and I'm like, peace out, this is not my goal, then I still have something finished. And I can still have, not that it's something to fall back on by any means. Like, I feel like our CPMs here are amazing and fantastic and know so much. But I have definitely heard them. There are at least several that have told me if we had some kind of CM route here, they would do it in a heartbeat. Like in a heartbeat, that they would take another 2 years of a master's program to be able to prescribe medications, to legally be able to carry medications, to be able to charge the rates that they should be charging, but like to be able to have bill insurance more efficiently, like all of these things, and we just don't have a pathway. And so
that's definitely like an Arizona struggle though.
Yes, it is.
You know,
it is.
like in Florida, CPMs are carrying Pitocin, prescribing antibiotics, you know, like doing, you know, and in other states it's legal to not only carry Pitocin and Metrogen and antibiotics and IV, but also do breaches and twins and BMI and you know, and all of these, it's like, so I'm going to skip around questions, but do you plan on staying in Arizona, which is why you're like,
I was born and raised here. We have a ton of family here. It would be very shocking if I left.
So for you, you're thinking like Arizona future. Looks like more autonomy and ability to serve birthing people as a CNM. So, okay, I'll go back to sorry, I needed to hear that. Like, I was like, I feel like this is going somewhere. I need to hear why she chose PEP. And so anyways, so you chose this preceptor based on like, she was available. Yeah. Really?
And so she's been great. And I speak no ill of her. Like as a person, she is wonderful and amazing and awesome. But she's just not used to having a student. And I feel like I'm so wanted and needed there, but it's also that I am like, I'm not being pushed and challenged because it's just not it's not her norm, and which is totally fine. And I knew that coming in. And so, but it's been a great learning experience, like to see how she handles things. She is also like, I'm a third at births with her. And so it's like, trying to learn where I fit is also interesting because I'm like, so that's been kind of like, am I assistant or am I just charting or am I doing heart like where's my role? So, and that's gotten better as births have gone on and whatnot. But it's still just been like, where do I fit as a third? Because that's something that she's promised her clients, that she has her assist as another midwife that's in the community.
So she has a primary midwife, like a senior midwife, a secondary midwife, and then an assistant / student.
Yeah, is what the setup is right now. And so, which has also been nice though, because it's always put this like, if I don't make a birth, I'm not leaving her in the lurch by any means, which I haven't missed any births with her, but it's been kind of like, you know, my life is a little crazy. And so it's been that nice kind of like a little security blanket that I'm like, okay, well, I'm a third. So if I'm not there, it's not like the end of the world kind of thing. But yeah, so this other midwife reached out, you know, a couple months into my journey and was like, I'm looking for, actually her senior student that had just finished NARM reached out to me and was like, I think you would make a really good fit with this midwife. Are you? And like, cool. The midwife had put the word out there, like she's looking for a student. And I was just like, I don't know, can I really take on a second? And I was like, I reached out and I was like, I don't know if I can do this, but can we talk about it and see? And it was just like, we went to lunch and it was like, we just clicked. Like,
I was just supposed to say like kismet. Like it felt just right.
It was totally, it just felt right. Like, she's just like, she's my person. Like, and so, and everything lined up because the way her prenatal days fell on days that were off days for me, typically with my first preceptor, she didn't have a ton of births. And so it was kind of like, okay, let's try this. Let's do it. I also knew that she had just finished nursing school and she teaches our didactics portion. So the Arizona Associations of Midwives puts on trainings for their students monthly. So we have one didactic training a month and one skills training a month, and it's like dirt cheap. And so it's fantastic and amazing. And I try to go to all of them. But she puts on these like fantastic didactic trainings on all kinds of subjects, and they're just so well thought through, and like she's so like dig into the research, and like that's
totally your jam. I was just gonna say like that is your jam down right.
Yeah. And so it's like, and which the other midwife I work with does too, but she's much more like, she's a little more woo, which I don't, it's not a great word, just, but it's, you know, it's kind of the clientele she attracts. And I love that for her. And she fits perfect. And like, it's so her, and it's not me on that.
Right. Yeah.
So, and so, but I have adored working with both of them. And so, so the second midwife that I have, that I joined on with, she's just been fantastic and great and amazing. And we've had some really hard times. Hi, sorry, the dog's, the dog's back. And so the first birth that we did together was we ended up having a fetal loss. And so, it was a lot. And so, and it was actually the weekend that Augustine was here, teaching. And so it was like, we went and all of this happened, and we actually didn't know what was, how the baby was going to do. But it was so amazing. And it was just like walking into this community of midwives that's like, I didn't even have to say anything. It was like, they're like, what's wrong? And I just like felt enveloped and like loved and like taken in. And I have had a number of midwives reach out to me over the past 4 months or so, and it's just like, hey, I just want to check in, how are you doing? And they're not my preceptors, they're just like midwives in the community that I know and like have been around and been a part of, but like they have no like obligation or like they're just there, and so it's like to know that community is there, like, is another reason that I'm like, I don't want to walk away from finishing my CPM, because this is the community that I want to learn from.
Well, maybe even you could work as a CPM while in nursing school. Like,
totally.
I mean, of course, maybe taking like one client a month or something, because you're going to be really busy. But like you said, you have a lot of prerequisites to get into nursing school to begin with. Then it's nursing school. Then it's another program after nursing school. For those of you who are thinking about doing a CNM, it's not just like nursing school and then a test and you're a CNM. It's first of all, probably like what would you say, a year of prerequisites before nursing school?
For me, it's probably gonna take a year, but I've been doing like one class at a time. So I could bump it up and get into nursing school quicker.
But some people don't even have the prerequisites to do the prerequisites.
Yes.
Right? That's something I was looking at, is like, you can't take microbiology before taking anatomy and physiology, before taking biology 1, right? Like,
that's most of the reason why I'm doing one class at a time, because most of them are prereqs for the rest of them. So it's like, do one and then do the next, and then
So you prereqs for nursing school, 2 years of nursing school, then 2 to 3 years of essentially, or 4 years of nursing school if you're getting a bachelor's in nursing, right? It depends. So there's 2 routes. You can be an RN or a bachelor's in nursing moving on. Yeah. So our community college here actually has a really great program, and it's like a dual enrollment. And so you can get your bachelor's at the same time as your nursing degree. So hopefully, fingers crossed, if it all works well, it should take me 2 to 2.5 years to get the nursing degree done with the bachelor's. So what's your timeline look like right now? Like, when do you plan on being a CPM, passing PEP, being a CPM? And then when does nursing school end and masters of nursing begin? Yeah.
So the hope and goal, if it all goes to plan, right, which, probably won't, but to be done with my CPM and sit for NARM in the spring of 2023. So a little over a year out. And then would start nursing school that summer. I would hopefully, the hope is to get into the dual enrollment program, which is a competitive program to get into. And so, but that starts summer, and then it's a 2-year program, 2.5-year program, I guess. It runs like summer, fall, spring is what it runs. It's 6 semesters, or however you want to count the summer. But, and then the master's program, I am not 100% sure where or what that'll lead, because there's so many options for CNM. And we actually have another one that's the university south of us in Tucson is looking to start a midwifery program. And so, that program is like 2.5 years, but there are other programs that are 2 years. It just kind of depends on where you're at and how stuff gets added and what stuff has changed at that point. So I'm not putting eggs in a basket, too many eggs in that basket, because it's still a ways off. But I think the end of 2027 is the goal.
Okay.
Before that,
let's follow this along, girl. Everybody who's watching, Laura, let's follow her along.
So
so you could be a midwife though for like 5 years.
Yeah.
While going to school. I mean, again,
and that is
going to be
hope.
full time. But
we have a number of birth centers here that give great options for CPMs that can take call schedules, that can do, that kind of stuff, can do backup work, can maybe take a client a month kind of thing. So that is also another reason I'm like, I want my CPM. I want to be able to use it to do birth. I don't want to shelf birth. I don't want to not be in the birth world for 5 years. Like, that is something by the end of it, I know I would be totally burnt out. So I know I have to keep my toes in it somehow, some way, to like be a part of it. And
So we want to hear a birth story, and it can be a birth story where you learned something about yourself, like a growth opportunity. It can be something you like really want to apply a clinical, skill to, totally up to you. It can be a hard birth story, if you wanted to tell us that too. You choose.
So I'll tell you about the a couple weeks ago, we had a mama that birthed a 10-pound, 1-ounce baby at home and didn't care. And so it was a birth, and that's my second preceptor. Like, we click, I adore her, and she just sees in me that like the skills that I have that I don't know I have. And so it's like, okay, so we've been to a couple births. She's like, so you're gonna catch this baby. I'm gonna stand right next to you and you're gonna catch this baby. And I'm like,
okay. Like out of the blue, like you didn't plan on doing any catching.
We had talked about like we've talked about it, but every time I walk into a birth, I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be different. And I don't know if she's going to want to catch. Yeah. And she's just like, okay, so you're going to catch the baby, right? Yeah. Like, it has to. And so now we've gotten to the rhythm. I'm like, okay, if I'm in a birth with her, I'm typically the one that's catching. And she's here. Like, she's not, sure. It's not like she's standing on the other side of the room letting me do all the things, but she's like, you're going to do this. Like, I'm going to be right here. If you need my hands, they're right behind yours, And so, so we had this 10-pound, 1-ounce baby that was our second birth in 12 hours. And mom, like, we were at a birth, was great, beautiful butter birth. Got called at the end, like, hi, I think I'm in labor. And so we both went home and got about 3 hours of sleep and went back, and I showed up at this mom's house. My preceptor had gotten there before me. And this mama was a multip. It was her second baby. And she had birthed a big baby before. So we weren't shocked that this baby was going to be big, but it was, we kind of expected it. And so I walk in and she's sitting on a couch and I'm like, why are we here? Like,
right. She's just chilling, watching TV or something.
She's just chilling. Like, she's got her whole family there. Like, they live in like a multi-generational household. And so I'm like, there's a lot of people, and this mom does not seem to be in labor. And I'm like, I talked to my preceptor and I'm like, so what's going on? And she's like, well, I checked her before you got here. She's a 7. I was like, oh, we're not leaving. And so it was just like, I was like, okay, well, let's get stuff set up. And so we got stuff set up, and it was like the most chill birth. And I was like, we were hanging out in the kitchen and they were in their bedroom, and but at some point we're like, where's this baby? Like, where's this baby? And she started getting pushy, and we're like, okay, great. And then stuff just petered out, and it's like, I know, like, we chatted, and there's totally this spot where it's totally normal that before you start pushing to stuff to kind of peter out and
sleep
and have a break. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
And so she's like, Wapio and the matrona, she calls it the quietude, which I really love. And it's just like, okay, it's quiet. It's this peaceful moment that like everything's still and we're just kind of waiting on this baby to like make its grand entrance. And so, but then it kind of just started like, it's, half an hour, like we got to the point where we were like 2 hours and we're like, nothing's happening. Like her contractions had spaced way out and slowed way down. And it was just kind of like, what do we do? And so I was like, well, we gotta get her up. Like she's rested, right? Like she's
it's been 4 hours of sleeping and now she has no contractions.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, you're sitting at like a 7. So we checked her again and she's like a 9 with a lip and having no contractions. I'm like, oh my God. Okay. So we got up, and so in addition to all the other things I mentioned at the beginning, I'm also a Spinning Babies parent educator. And so I'm like, that's what
where's baby?
Where's baby? That's where my preceptors are like, okay, do your Spinning Babies thing. And it's like, they both know enough Spinning Babies, but they're like, plenty more, like go do your Spinning Babies thing. And so we're like, we get this mom twisted upside down. And I'm like, she's off the edge of the couch and we're like shaking her bum, and she's just a trooper. She's such a trooper. And at that point, my midwife was just exhausted. Like she had been up longer than I have, which is a perk of being a student, that I don't have to field all the phone calls. So I usually get more sleep than my preceptor does. And so I was like, okay. So I'm like, if you can't deal with this one, then call somebody else, call in a backup. I feel great. Like I'm like, none of this feels wrong to me. And so she ended up calling in another midwife, and the midwife that she called in is actually my future preceptor that I'm set to start birth with in January, and was my midwife for my second baby when I had her. And so it was just one of those.
I love working with the person that helped you with your baby. That's so cool.
And I hadn't had that opportunity yet. And so I'm like, in all the years I've been doulaing and like been in the birth world, like it wasn't the universe's plan for us to cross paths yet. And so this was the first birth we were at together. And she's not typically one that is, if you're in phase 2, you're assisting. And if you're in phase 3, that's when you start catching. And so I was like, I had written it. I was like, cool, I'm not catching this baby. That's okay. I'm just excited. Like, I'm just so happy to be here. And so we did all these things with this mom. We, lots of spinning babies, lots of belly lifts. And I had like taken over this birth basically because my preceptor and the 2 midwives were like chatting and conferencing, and I had just kind of like taken over this birth. And I was like, they're still in the room and nothing's really happening that I can't handle. I'm, do heart tones and all the things. And she's not having, her contractions are still like 10 minutes apart. And so, we sit her on the toilet, and because the toilet's the magic, and 4 or 5 contractions later, she's like, starts grunting and like making this, you can tell that the baby's making movement, like finally baby's coming down. So the new midwife walks in the room, and we knew each other really well, obviously. And so she comes up to me and she's like, so are you catching this baby or am I catching this baby? And I was like,
that is a question. Okay.
Right. Like, that's a huge question. Like, the fact that you're asking me is such a huge compliment. And I was like, well, I'll catch this baby. Like, I'm not, I already have a rapport with this client and she doesn't. And so, so this mom gets on her hands and knees on the bed and starts pushing. And it's just one of the few clients that I've had that is like, I don't want a birth tub. And I'm like, okay, which she wouldn't have birthed in the tub anyways, but it was kind of like, tub wasn't even an option. So it's like, okay, what are we doing for the land to get your baby out? So she gets on her hands and knees on the bed and she starts pushing, and we finally start seeing baby's head, and baby, a couple of contractions, baby's moving each time. And so I go up to her and I was like, Mama, we can see your baby. Like, every time you push, I can see your baby. And it was just this like this tender moment between the 2 of us. Like, the whole rest of the room was like gone. And she's like, oh my God, are you serious? You can see my baby? Because we had talked, there had been a lot of transfer talk because,
Yeah.
this baby's not going, and we're really worried that she's having a really big baby. And but nothing indicated that we needed to transfer, and she didn't want to.
Heart tones were fine,
we were pretty
vitals were
dull.
fine,
Yep.
except
It's just long.
progressing until she wasn't.
Yeah. And and she was like, I feel good. Like, she got her 2-hour nap basically. And so she pushed this baby out, and her husband, I like helped her husband catch baby, and like we put baby up to mom, and it was just this most endearing moment of like, her mom came in, and her mom, like, you can tell English is a very second language for her, so she was speaking Spanish, and so it was like this just super endearing moment of just the three of them, and like we were just witness to it. And it was just like, oh man, it was just like the epitome of like what home birth should be. And it was just such a huge win, because with COVID, I feel like this is not just a me problem, but like we have had so many transfers, and either it's like baby slides out and there's no issues, or we transfer. There's no like try to fix things and baby still comes out. It's like, it's just like the fact that it's like, okay, we did have to fix something, and something was not quote unquote normal, but we still had all the knowledge in the room to make her feel safe and to keep them both healthy. And that she still birthed this baby. And this baby was a tank. He was 10 pounds, 1 ounce, and 22 inches long. And I was just like, you birthed a 6-week-old, like what?
Yeah.
I'm like, and she was just like beyond excited and so happy. And it was just, I don't know, it was just a beautiful moment. And I got to help her birth the placenta, and my I guess she was my preceptor for that birth, but she's going to be my preceptor. And she was just like really encouraging and like right over my shoulder. And like, and so it was just this whole big circle of like, it felt like one preceptor handing me off to the next, even though we still had a couple births left with my current preceptor. So.
Yeah. So was it like at that birth where you guys kind of chatted about doing precepting together, or was it later?
Oh, we had talked, actually it was earlier. So like, my new preceptor is like, she's like the epitome of organized. Like she needs to make a course in like how to organize your practice, because it's she's got all the things in order for her, it's great. And most of the midwives in our community are like, I wish I could be as put together as she is. And so she knew 6 months ago that she was losing a student at the end of the year because she was finishing and needed a new student to come on. And she's just picky about who she brings in. So we had the conversation.
Cool.
And she knew I was in this position. Both my preceptors currently are stopping taking clients. So I was kind of putting it out there. It's like, so if anyone needs a student in 22, like, let me know.
It sounds like you have a lot of good, like you said in the beginning, good community in Arizona with options. And like your way of finding good preceptors was to just be part of the community and be out there all the time and things like that. And we talked a little bit about some of the laws in Arizona, which have obviously prompted you and obviously several other midwives to move into like a CNM space. But what, like, give these listeners a little bit of an example of a struggle in an Arizona law. Like, okay, this whole, you had a hemorrhage, you used Pitocin, which you're legally able to do, but then you have to transfer afterwards.
Take that. Technically, you are supposed to transfer afterwards. Technically,
you fixed the problem.
Yes, and you were supposed to transfer. And their classification of a hemorrhage is 500 milliliters, and so it's like, which is normal blood loss, which even the hospital.
I know. I was just gonna say it's actually not. Like ACOG specifically stated in 2019, the new is 1,000, but okay.
Yes, and so but the state. So our midwives, our CPNs are under the Board of Health. So the Arizona Department of Health holds our board, holds our laws. We are one of the only professional medical groups that does not have its own board. So CNMs run under the Nursing Board of Health. And so they have their own laws and their own guidelines, but they have prescriptive writing privileges, and they're able to, give those out. And so that's part of the issue, is that we don't have prescriptive privileges. And so if you give Pitocin, then it's like, you should transfer because it's obviously an emergency that you're getting Pitocin. Our midwives are not technically allowed to carry side attack. We have nothing in our rules about IVs or antibiotics. And so it's like, it's a super gray area. It's like, what do you do if you have GBS? The clients have to hire somebody to come in addition to their midwife to give them antibiotics. And it's like, it's one of those like, well, if they're available. So like there's ways around it. And so, I've had clients that got GBS or got antibiotics for GBS at home, but it's like, well, grandma was a nurse. And so she put the IV line in. Husband was an EMT. So they put the IV line in because we don't technically have like IVs are a super gray area, but they're
right. If it's not written as legal, then it's unwritten as illegal.
Yeah. We have our code around like we can do VBACs at home, but they have to follow Nagel's rule. Sorry, not Nagel's. What's the one where they have to progress
Friedman's curve.
Centimeter an hour. Friedman's curve. There you go. I'm like, Nagel's is not right. But we have to go off of Nagel's. Nagel's is the only rule that we're allowed to use to classify due dates. And it's like at 41 weeks and 6 days and 23 hours, we have to transfer. Like as soon as they hit 42 weeks, we can't be there. So if they're in labor, you have to walk out of the house and be like, God, you're on your own, or you have to transfer in because nothing like, so there's just lots of really not great things that could make home birth so much safer if we were able to legally do. And so my husband, when I talked to him, I was like, so I'm just going to commit less felonies, but I'm going to go to school longer. How's that sound to you? Because
he's like, sounds great. I'd rather debt than you in jail.
Yeah.
Because that's going to end up with $1 million bond anyways.
Yeah. So it's just one of those, like, the laws here are not good. They're not good. And they don't want to reopen them. And so it's like, I think our laws were open 6 or 7 years ago. And like, they got improvements made, but then the board's like, that the board that doesn't know anything about midwifery is like, oh, no, that's enough. We're good. And so they actually just opened this year, and it was like, they just changed wording on stuff. Cause like technically they have to review our laws every X many of years because we sit under the Department of Health. But it was like, they didn't give us any opportunity. We had like this 4-day window to like put in and submit stuff that we were hoping to get changed. And it was really random stuff. It was like half the law and half the rules, they were trying to change mother to client. And then in other parts, they changed client to mother. And we're like, just leave it at client. Why are we trying to like put these ambiguous terms of like gender into our rules? Like that's a whole nother ballgame that we don't need to go there. Like if you've got the parts downstairs, like have a home birth, like that's, and that shouldn't have to be in our laws. Like that shouldn't be anywhere. And so they were, it's like stuff like that is what was changed, but like they wouldn't change the hemorrhage back to like up to 1,000, even though that's what ACOG's guidelines are. But I mean, there's not a home birth midwife that I know that's going to let a person get to 1,000 before they are giving Pitocin. Like, I mean,
and so that's your problem is now you give Pit and you transfer and the birthing person can even say no, and you still could lose your license over it.
Yeah. Or you give Pit and you can't chart it because, and then, so then it's like, how does the chart, but then how does the chart look? Like we can't, it's not our, sometimes the charting's not perfect but how does that look for future? So if they move states and we try to transfer records and it's like, future care is like based on what we're saying. And it's so
interesting. Well, so what would be some advice that you would give students or a student today or a midwife or a student midwife or a preceptor? Like what's some advice you really want to give out?
Find somebody to walk this journey with you, like make friends with other students. I have another student midwife that we were friends before this and kind of happened into this journey. She always knew she wanted to be a midwife, but I kind of pushed her into it going a little faster, I think. I don't know, or we fell into the path at the same time, and so we're kind of walking this path together, and it is beyond helpful to be like, so what are you doing on paperwork here? Or what are you doing with this, or how is the preceptor treating you, or how are you doing this kind of stuff? Like, where are you at in your journey? Because we're pretty on task. And so it'll be interesting to see where she goes, because she's actually starting a MEEK program. So it'll be interesting to see how that shifts her journey and my journey
and changes with both of you.
Yeah.
That'll be really cool. And maybe you could like have a practice together, a CNM and a CPM. Like that would be badass. That's exactly, because then you could blend those two things together with your scope and her training.
Yeah. Which we have in the Valley a little bit, but not enough.
Yeah.
So
where can people find you, like to donate to your journey or to follow your journey? So Instagram, Facebook, Cash App, Venmo, all those fun things.
So I am on Instagram and Facebook as Birth with Knowledge. Though I haven't been super active due to being a birth and with two preceptors and all the kinds of things. But I'm at Birth with Knowledge is my business name. If anyone wants to donate to the journey, I'm Lora Fiala on Venmo, which is LORA FIALA.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we'll keep following you, and 2023 start celebrating your CPN, and 2027 celebrate your CNM, and
that's the goal.
I hope to have more community midwifery with you, even as a CNM. Like, we'd love to continue to support that. Yeah. Awesome. Anything else you want to tell our listeners before we let you go?
I don't think so. I'm always happy to chat. So if people have questions, they're welcome to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's awesome listening to your story. I can't wait to follow your journey. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.